What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And now Shane Bowen is the New York Giants defensive coordinator, and this defense is going to look a whole lot different because of that. I mean, you're going to see a pretty big scheme change here. The Giants previously running this 3-4 man coverage heavy, blitz heavy, attacking defensive scheme. Now with Shane Bowen moving into a multiple front, a lot of 3-4 and 4-3, a lot of sitting back in zone coverage with 4-man pass rushes, something we didn't see a whole lot during the Wink Martindale era. So this team is going to look a lot different. And right now, if you're looking at this roster and the talent on it, does it really match up? Does the player personnel match up with the scheme that Shane Bowen intends to run? Maybe not quite as nicely as he would prefer it to. So in today's episode, we're going to look at 3 players that the Giants could sign this offseason, familiar with Shane Bowen, to kind of help make this transition a little bit smoother, bring in some familiar faces, some guys who know this scheme and know how to play in it. Kind of similar how to when Wink Martindale was hired, he brought in guys like Jihad Ward, right? A couple of guys who have already played under Wink Martindale, know what the defense is like, and know how to lead some of the guys, the younger guys in it, and help them get used to what this defense entails. It's kind of the same thinking here for some of these Titans free agents that Shane Bowen could potentially target, and that's what we're going to dive into in this episode. But before we do so, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode, subscribe to the channel if you are new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how do you think it's going to help the Giants to kind of find some of these free agents that might be familiar with Shane Bowen? How do you think that will help them kind of transition this defense and get prepared for the upcoming season?
Well, you know what? I think that if the Giants are thinking about the future, it definitely will be accompanied by some free agents that Shane Bowen is familiar with. And look, just like you mentioned, Wink Martindale brought in a couple of his guys. Jihad Ward, a guy who, not the best pass rusher on earth. I think he had the second lowest pass rush win rate in football this past season. But he can stop the run. And he's a crazy guy in the locker room. We've seen the videos. But I think his time with the Giants is unfortunately probably coming to an end. And you kind of mentioned a couple guys that could fit. Deno Autrey is one of the guys that you discussed with me prior to the episode, and the guy that we're going to discuss right now, former undrafted free agent out of Mississippi State. In 2014, the year I graduated high school. So he's been in the league for what feels like a whole minute. 33 years old. He is older. But again, productive as hell. If there's anyone that you're looking for to be a pure pass rusher and just come into a game and make an impact in that way, Deno Autrey is the guy that the Giants should be looking at. And, you can I'll let you talk about projected salary and whatnot in a minute. But if you look at his kind of overall statistics, what he brings to the table, not the best tackler on earth at a 24.4% missed tackle rate. To me, Deno Autrey is a third down rotational pass rusher guy that can step in, make an impact in that regard. And if you need a depth piece, if you need a guy maybe to supplement injury, he's a good veteran to have. I don't know if I'm starting him on day one unless we have a really big lack of depth. I'd prefer to go and maybe draft a guy with upside, or maybe Azeez Ojulari wins that job outright, and then hopefully he stays healthy and can continue his development. But Deno Autrey is a good player to have. Step in, could do some good stuff for you. Had 12 sacks last year, 53 pressures, made an impact in that regard. So, what are your thoughts about him? What do you think he would cost? Played 767 snaps last year, so a lot last 3 years with Tennessee. I do think that this would be a good signing for the Giants, a guy that basically replaced Jihad Ward. He'd probably end up playing a lot of snaps, and he's productive when he's on the football field.
Yeah, and he's been with Shane Bowen each of his last 3 seasons. The Titans hired Shane Bowen as their defensive coordinator in 2021. Same offseason that they signed Deno Autrey to a 3-year, $21.5 million contract. So for the last 3 seasons, he's played under Bowen, and he's played really well. I mean, these have been the best seasons of his career playing under Shane Bowen, so you'd have to believe that he'd want to follow Bowen over to the New York Giants and continue to play at a high level. Like you mentioned, 11.5 sacks this past season, had 9 in 2021 and 8 in 2022. So every single year, at least 8 sacks out of Deno Autrey. That's pretty solid production, especially, again, considering the fact that Shane Bowen's defense is not blitz heavy. It's very much let your best pass rusher get after the offensive lineman and get after the quarterback ultimately. So I think what we saw under Bowen was a lot of productivity out of a veteran defensive lineman who kind of had a position change under Shane Bowen as well. You're talking about somebody who used to play almost primarily on the interior of the defensive line, moving out to play that 5 tech, which is basically basically defensive end on the outside of the tackle. In the Giants 3-4 defense that they've been playing under Wink Martindale, the defensive ends kind of line up over the guards. This is more of a defensive end who lines up over the offensive tackle. So again, that's talking about that multiple front, how the Giants are going to play some 3-4, but also play some 4-3. I actually see this as, yes, in some ways a replacement for Jihad Ward, but also in some ways a replacement for Leonard Williams. Because if Leonard Williams were still on this team, if you remember back in the Betcher days and the Patrick Graham days when Leonard Williams was here, he played a lot on the outside of the offensive tackle as an edge rusher, as a defensive lineman, a 5-tech. And so with Denico Autrey, I think moving into this new defensive system, that's kind of the role that he would play. Of course, he can move on into the interior. He's 34. He's a big guy. He's played on the interior before. He's 6'5", 285 pounds. So he can be one of your interior defensive linemen, but one of those defensive linemen that kicks out wide as well, just like Leonard Williams used to. So I see this as, one of those supplemental rotational pass rushers who helps kind of transition guys into the new defense, like Jihad Ward. But I also see Denico Autrey as the guy who is going to do for this defense what Leonard Williams used to do for this defense before Wink Martindale was in town, and what Leonard Williams would have continued to do for this defense if he weren't traded during the midway point of the season. So Denico Autrey, super productive the last 3 years, veteran leader, 34 years old, has been with a number of teams, always in the AFC, has never played in the NFC, played for the Raiders, then the Colts, then the Titans. So now I think that this is a guy who can probably look to get more of himself out of his career before it's over. 34, last 3 seasons, really solid, playing underneath Shane Bowen. I imagine he would want to continue playing under Shane Bowen. The Titans can't be an attractive destination for him again this offseason, I'd imagine, because his head coach is gone, his defensive coordinator is gone, that coaching staff has been torn apart, and they're expected to make a lot of roster changes as well. So I don't think that Denico Autrey is going to look at Tennessee as his most attractive destination, even though he's been playing there the last 3 years. I think that a place like New York, with Shane Bowen as his defensive coordinator, that would be an attractive destination. So I think that there's reasons for both parties to be interested here, and I'm really hoping that this is a deal that gets done. I think that the Giants, they need more pass rushing depth. They need a guy who can kind of rotate in on third down and can be reliable for you. And when you're looking at Denico Autrey's career, I mean, the lowest amount of games played in a season is 10 as a rookie and then 12 thereafter. But he played in all 17 games this past season with 14 starts. So he's a dependable player. And talking about this edge rushing group for the New York Giants, Kayvon Thibodeau, think he's going to be great, but needs to be more consistent. Azeez Ojulari, not on the field as much as we would like him to be. So Denico Autrey is a quality starter who can play on the interior and on the edge for you and is going to be out there consistently and not injured. That's a perfect signing for me if I'm the New York Giants. I think that Denico Autrey just makes a lot of sense for this team. But now, Alex, I want to talk about somebody else on the defensive side of the ball. Let's move over to the secondary, because we've been talking about this new defensive scheme that the Giants are going to be running. A lot of zone coverage, a lot of sitting back, letting the pass rushers do their job, but also a heavy reliance on the quality of play out of the secondary. Those defensive backs need to be solid. And we know going into this offseason, Adoree Jackson is a free agent, unlikely to be re-signed by the New York Giants. Xavier McKinney, also a free agent, unlikely to be re-signed by the New York Giants, barring anything drastic. I think they need to re-sign him, but we'll see. So you're looking at this defense going into this 2024 season. Deonte Banks, your rookie cornerback from this past season, is your leading man. He is the focal point of that defensive secondary. He needs a complementary piece. I don't think that the Giants can go into 2024 expecting Deonte Banks plus a rookie or plus Trey Hawkins. I don't think that's going to be solid enough. We thought it would be this year, and it wasn't. I think we got to learn from that mistake. The Giants need to go out into free agency and sign a veteran cornerback. And I like Sean Murphy-Bunting, who was just with the Tennessee Titans. Many of you might know him from years ago. I believe he won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but he spent last season on a one-year deal with the Titans. He played in 14 games, started all of them, 2 interceptions, 8 pass defenses, 57 combined tackles, 3 tackles for loss. He kind of did it all and kind of plays in the nickel, plays outside, but really is just a veteran presence to add to the secondary. And I think that's something that the Giants desperately need, is more veteran presences in that what is a really youthful secondary for the Giants. So Alex, what are your thoughts on Sean Murphy-Bunting as a potential low-cost option for the New York Giants to reunite with Shane Bowen?
Yeah, I mean, look, here's my kind of take on Sean Murphy-Bunting, and it starts with this. The cornerback free agent class this year is out of control in terms of how deep it is. Like, stupendous amount of talent. Adoree Jackson, Kendall Fuller, Stephon Gilmore, Micah Hyde, Jeff Okuda, Chidobe Awuzie, Emmanuel Mosley, CJ Henderson, Jordan Lewis, Steven Nelson, Levi Wallace, Rakia Sin, Sean Murphy Bunting, Shaquille Griffin. Like, the list goes on. Like, it just keeps going. It's insane how many free agents there are that are good players that may be able to step in and help this Giants team. But with that being said, Murphy Bunting's a good option. He's a veteran, but he's also only 26 years old. So keep in mind, like, this is a player that, obviously has a lot of experience, but also is at a pretty young age and can continue playing at a decent level for quite a long time. Now, my problem with Sean Murphy Bunting is that he wasn't very good for Tennessee last year. He spent that 1 year with them. He had a couple of really good games, but he was mainly inconsistent and kind of bad in coverage. He gave up 628 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 2 interceptions and 5 pass breakups. Being that he knows Shane Bowen's system, maybe that gets better. Like, he was a decent tackler. Maybe he improves in the second year of the same system. I think that's what you'd be hoping for if you were to go out and sign Sean Murphy Bunting, because of that experience he has. Like, you'd leverage that. But I do think there are better free agents on the market the Giants should consider, and guys that maybe fit our style better, right? You're thinking about our defense now. Shane Bowen's going to have to change it a little bit, right? Like, you have to estimate you're going to a new team with different personnel, different players, and maybe he's going to have to tweak it. So I think, like, you bring in a player that fills a weakness for the Giants and may not fit like perfection to your scheme, more or less, because if the Giants have a weakness, I think that's what's going to be the first thing to address. And for what it's worth, they do have a lack of talent at CB2. So I think that obviously it makes sense to go out and get a guy like Sean Murphy Bunting. I think it's fine. This is a deep free agent class, as I referenced, so the Giants aren't going to have a lack of options, that's for sure. What are your thoughts on that, though? The depth that the Giants do have in free agency to go out and get a CB2, I think they're probably, you still have Cordell Flott. He looked decent at times this past season. We'll see what happens with Trey Hawkins. People already like, oh, Trey Hawkins sucks, blah, blah, blah. He's a 6th-round pick, guys. Give him a little time to develop. How often do you see 6th-round picks step in and be immediate, impact players? Very, very rarely. So I think you got to give Trey Hawkins at least another offseason to see what he's got in terms of potential. But I'm definitely not going into the season. I'm tired of going into the season like hoping guys take a big step forward. So I think, like we've talked about, right tackle, Jermaine Illuminor, Onwenu. I think getting a guy that can unseat Evan Neal at right tackle is in the best interest of the Giants. I think bringing in a guy who's going to lock down CB2, and if Trey Hawkins comes out of nowhere and is ridiculous, or Cordell Flott has a ridiculous offseason, maybe you consider that competition battle there. But I think the Giants need more of a veteran presence at CB2, and Deonte Banks being a very young rookie, or rather a sophomore player, they have no experience in the secondary, which makes it even more imperative that you bring Xavier McKinney back because of his experience. So, I do think that right now the Giants will look to a veteran. Sean Murphy Bunting, being already familiar with Shane Bowen's scheme, makes sense. Maybe he can leverage that into a second year that is better than what he had last season. So I do get the logic there. But what are your thoughts about the depth of this free agent class?
I'll take it even a step further and say there's a lot of depth in this free agency class. There's also a lot of depth in this upcoming cornerback draft class. A lot of talent at the cornerback position in this upcoming 2024 NFL draft. And I'm not just talking about the first round talents, because there are quite a few cornerbacks projected to go in the first round, but even on day 2, the Giants really should try and capitalize on that cornerback position. There is a lot of talent. I know we've talked, Alex, about wide receiver being a deep position in this year's draft class, and that's definitely the case, but so is cornerback, and that's kind of funny. You got the two guys that face off against each other, the receiver and the corner, both deep in this class, and that was shown at the Senior Bowl this past week. There was a lot of talented receivers at the Senior Bowl, and a lot of them were getting locked up by some of the cornerbacks there. Some of them were getting beat. Some of the cornerbacks were getting beat by how much talent there was at the receiver position. But those two positions, very deep in this draft class. So as the Giants go into this free agency period, they may look at some of these veteran guys on a low-cost deal, like a Sean Murphy Bunting, and say, okay, you can be our starter for like half of the season, but we're going to hope that we draft somebody who develops into our starter for the second half of the season or for next season. And I think that's a really good way to look at it if you're the Giants. Find that stopgap player in free agency, but really try to find that long-term player in the draft. And I guess that should be the way you kind of operate at every position in every offseason when you're looking at the future of your roster building. But I do think that there is something to be said, Alex. You make a good point where Sean Murphy Bunting, that's an okay player to bring in, familiar with Shane Bowen, played okay at times last season. That's a decent signing. However, there's definitely better options out there for the New York Giants. Now, what I'll say is Sean Murphy-Bunting, I think he's going to come in pretty cheap. I don't think he's going to cost you more than 1 year, $5 million on an average annual salary, right? But if you want to make sure that you get good, high-quality cornerback play, pushing that budget up towards 10 million and getting a real high quality starter at the cornerback spot, that's going to serve to benefit the New York Giants in the long run because it makes Deonte Banks a better player, makes the safeties a better player, and having good cornerbacks makes your pass rushers better players. The longer that the quarterback has to wait for the receivers to break open against good coverage, more time for the pass rushers to get home. So definitely a good point there, Alex, where there is quite a bit of talent available in this free agency pool at the cornerback spot. Sean Murphy-Bunting stands out because of his connection to Shane Bowen. Could be a good option for the Giants as a CB2. However, not a guy that you're banking on. Not a guy that you're going into free agency saying, I need to get this guy because he's going to fix my defense. More one of those pieces, that depth guy, somebody that you can live with, but he's not your primary objective going into the offseason. So I do agree with you. It's a deep cornerback class. The Giants have a lot of options to look at. But now talking about the safety position, because both of us have now mentioned in this episode that we think Xavier McKinney, re-signing him so that he can play in Shane Bowen's defense, sounds necessary. Sounds like this is a defense that needs good safety play, needs some good talent on the back end. And we know that this is a young team lacking a bit of leadership if Xavier McKinney leaves especially. Leonard Williams is already gone. That's one of the leaders gone. And even talking about on the offensive side of the ball, Saquon Barkley, let's see what happens with his future. But this is a young football team that needs leadership. Maybe the Giants do re-sign Xavier McKinney and maintain that leadership, and maybe they don't. But either way, I think they need to add more talent to the safety position. McKinney, even though he is a great player and didn't miss a single snap this past season, has missed time with injuries in the past. Jason Pinnock, a good player, but will he fit in the scheme? That remains to be seen. So one other player that we can mention for the New York Giants to target in free agency is Terrell Edmunds. Now, Terrell Edmunds, brother of Trey Edmunds, who I think a lot of Giants fans wanted in last free agency, but Terrell Edmunds spent the majority of his career with the Pittsburgh Steelers from 2018 to 2022, signed with the Philadelphia Eagles last offseason on a one-year deal, and got traded mid-season to the Tennessee Titans. Titans gave up their star safety, brought in a lesser star of a safety in Terrell Edmunds, and added some draft capital in the meantime, but he played solid. He had 2.5 sacks, which I thought was interesting. He's had a sack almost every season of his career, had 48 combined tackles throughout the entirety of the year, but pretty much played as a rotational strong safety in the box for the Tennessee Titans last year, and I think that might be something that Shane Bowen is interested in bringing over to the New York Giants. So, Alex, I want to get your take on Terrell Edmunds. Do you think that he's a player the Giants should look at? Do you think that he would be a good fit? Or do you think that the Giants, if they do re-sign McKinney, are kind of good with what they have on the back end there at safety?
I think that if the Giants do re-sign McKinney, I think we're good. I think that we still have Dane Belton. Jason Pinnock is really solid. Those two guys can move into free safety if you need them to. Maybe you draft somebody in the mid to late rounds. I know we had Javarius Owens, who I think maybe have gotten hurt, but he's also been developing. So, there's some talent there. I think McKinney has become more of a guy that we need to extend. Like if it's kind of crazy though, Anthony, because we're really asking, is it McKinney or Saquon Barkley? Because we can't really re-sign both, in my opinion. If we do, I think it really holds us back in the future, especially if Daniel Jones remains our quarterback. If you let Daniel Jones go and you anticipate he's going to be gone, you could extend both of them and you could justify it. But at this point in time, we just don't know. So I'm going to side with the Giants aren't going to land a top quarterback in the draft, and you're kind of having to choose between McKinney and Saquon. And I think right now I'm going to go with McKinney, mainly because of the positional value, mainly because McKinney, his longevity of his career, the sustainability there is a little bit more, if not a lot more. And look, the truth is right now is that I just don't really know if this offense is going to do much next year. I think we're better off starting to focus on our passing game instead of forcing Saquon. And that's the thing about our offense, guys, and Saquon has been a stud for us for a long time now. But the truth is that we've been having no choice but to lean on our run game so much and drive him into the ground because our offense is so incapable of passing at a consistent level. We need to start throwing the ball and forcing it until we get it right. You know what I mean? We need to continue to, because this league is a passing game. It's a passing league now. Teams aren't really running the ball to championships anymore. And you look at the 49ers, you could use that as an example, but they have a really damn good passing game with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Brock Purdy there. So not to mention George Kittle. CMC is a luxury item in that entire offense. So I kind of feel as though right now the Giants need to develop their passing game, and they end up relying on Saquon to carry the load, and it's unsustainable, and we lose games anyway. So like, I love Saquon, would love to figure out a way to keep him, but if we have to pick between McKinney and Saquon, I think I have to lean McKinney in this scenario, because if we lose McKinney, our secondary, think about our secondary for an instance, that we don't have a great free safety. Our strong safety is Pinnock, who's good, but not great. And we have a second-year cornerback, and then maybe a new veteran corner that we bring in on a 1 or 2 year deal, or however that might look. Our secondary is going to be really, really spotty. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be not so good. We need McKinney back there, unfortunately, to keep us competitive in the secondary, I think, moving forward. So I think I would have to opt that direction. Although, like I said, I'd love to find a way to bring back both. I don't know how realistic it is, so I'm kind of like putting myself in a corner and forcing myself to make a decision on here. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. You may have differing opinions, and of course, I know a lot of you probably would say we need to bring back Saquon, and I get that logic too. So it's a hard decision either way you look at it. But Anthony, I feel as though right now, I really wouldn't even bother with Terrell Edmunds. I'd be looking at Jason Pinnock and Xavier McKinney as my primary two safeties for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I hope that's the case. I hope it's Pinnock and, of course, Xavier McKinney. I think that debate that you kind of just had with yourself there, it was fun to watch play out, you kind of arguing with yourself, but I think that we should have an argument in a future episode about it and kind of play both sides, discuss, should the Giants re-sign Saquon, or should they sign Xavier McKinney if it really is down to one or the other? I think that there's still a possibility that they can retain both of those players, although it's a slim possibility, and I think you know where I stand. I've been a huge advocate for extending Xavier McKinney for quite some time now, and I've been saying the Giants have a good player that they developed in-house. Don't let him leave. He's a really good player as well. Big Xavier McKinney fan. I think that he needs to be extended this offseason, so I'll agree with you on that end, and I guess I'll agree with you on the end of saying, well, Terrell Edmunds, maybe he's a quality depth piece if the New York Giants can't retain Xavier McKinney and need to add some more talent to the back end of their secondary. But overall, I don't want it to get to that point. I want the Giants to extend McKinney. You mentioned Jason Pinnock as another great player that the Giants have. You also mentioned Dane Belton, which I'm happy you did so because I think that there's some talent there. He hasn't been perfect so far, but he's flashed. He's definitely flashed some potential. He's gotten his hands on the football quite a few times, and I think that he could continue to develop into something quality for the Giants. And also Gervarius Owens, a player that I really liked for the New York Giants when they drafted him. Didn't have the rookie year he desired. Injuries played a part in that. But going into year two, I think another player who could continue to develop and hopefully fit in with Shane Bowen's new defense and maybe start to make a name for himself as a contributor on the back end. So Terrell Edmunds, a possibility out there for the Giants because of his connection to Shane Bowen, but also the connection isn't that strong, and I don't think he's a player that the Giants necessarily need to seek out in free agency. I think that they could do better, and I think that doing better would be re-signing and extending Xavier McKinney and paying him what he's worth, because he's worth quite a damn lot to this football team. So yeah, Xavier McKinney, we got to do another episode on him soon. Got to talk about why he's so important to this team and why they need to extend him. But of course, I know that there's a lot of Giants fans who don't feel that way, and I'm always interested to hear those thoughts down below in the comment section. And I think that we should definitely do an episode discussing Saquon Barkley versus Xavier McKinney, the value of those two players, and what the Giants might prioritize going into free agency. But we're getting close, man. We're only a month away from free agency, a month and some change away from finding out who the Giants are going to be cutting, signing, extending. It's going to be a wild time for this New York Giants team. A lot of rumors keep swirling about day in, day out. They're interested in this guy. No, they're not. Okay, they're interested in retaining Daniel Jones. No, they're not. All right, they're going to re-sign Saquon Barkley. No, they're not. I don't know anymore. There's just so much going around from so many different sources. It's getting a little bit wild, and I don't think we're going to get any true clarity on these things until the NFL scouting combine, when all those general managers and agents are in one location. Then we should start to get some clarity, and then right after that is free agency. So then we'll really know what the Giants' plans are for this upcoming season, and that's going to be really exciting. Of course, all that news, all those rumors, all those updates, we're going to be covering for you right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so don't miss the episode. Comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.